Welcome to The Knowledge. The Knowledge, a Levitt Group podcast, advanced knowledge for senior marketers. The Knowledge is a podcast of the Levitt Group, the sector interest group for senior marketers within the Chartered Institute of Marketing. To find out more about us, visit our website at www.levittgroup.org.uk or read the show notes for this podcast. Welcome to episode 17 of The Knowledge. I'm your host, Peter Domican. In this podcast, I'm talking to Daniel Priestley, the author of Entrepreneurial Revolution, How to Develop Your Entrepreneurial Mindset. As industries transform, the large corporates of the industrial age are being outpaced by fast-moving startups. So whether you have an interest in entrepreneurship for itself, you work for a small company, or you work for a large corporate and you're wondering how you and your company can adapt to meet the threats posed by new technology startups, then I think there'll be something of interest in this podcast for you. Hi Daniel, welcome to the podcast. I wonder if we could start off by you telling us about your background and what you do.
Well, my name's Daniel Priestley, and my background is as an entrepreneur. I started my first company at age 21 in Australia, and I built it to a national business before I was 25. I then moved to the United Kingdom, where I launched a new company here in the UK, and that's evolved into today what we have as an accelerator business, where we work with entrepreneurs all over the world. We have offices in 7 cities around the world, in Australia, Singapore, the UK, and the USA. And we have some of the world's most experienced and celebrated entrepreneurs who work with the rising stars to help them to stand out, scale up, and make a bigger impact in the world.
Our conventional view of an entrepreneur is someone like Richard Branson or Elon Musk, but that view of the world's changing, isn't it?
Well, if you go back not far, not too far in time, you kind of had 2 versions of the entrepreneur. One was Richard Branson, and one was Del Boy. The kind of person who couldn't get a job, the person who's kind of grifting. And really it's been since 2000, since the technology revolution, where essentially people felt more confident to take control of their own careers and their own lives, to start businesses, to have more boutique businesses. There's been an explosion of entrepreneurial companies, millions of them, in the UK, Australia, and the USA. And there's this kind of middle ground. There's someone who's definitely not a Del Boy and definitely not a Richard Branson, but someone who is commercializing an idea. They've got some intellectual property, they've got some ideas, they've got some product ideas, and they're taking it to market using the remarkable technology that now everybody has in their pocket.
What are the drivers towards entrepreneurship?
Oh, there are many trends that are driving the entrepreneurial boom. One of them is seeing your friends on Instagram. So, people post the best parts of their lives on social media, and it would appear that everyone's constantly traveling and roaming around the world, running businesses from their laptops, and sort of making tens of thousands of pounds a month from a cafe in Bali. So we're becoming more aware that there's these people living this digital nomad kind of lifestyle, this entrepreneurial free lifestyle, and it can be very alluring when you're working in a busy office with very tight deadlines, and taking time off is quite stressful, and even when you do get away, you're still kind of concerned about different projects and all of those sorts of things that you've got going on. So I think a lot of people are exploring other working options, other career options. I think the other thing that's driving it is that people kind of have this feeling that that retirement probably doesn't look the same for us as it did for our grandparents. So when my grandparents were working, the retirement age was 55, and that was mainly because people often the life expectancy was 65 to 70. So people retired at 55 to 60 and then didn't have long to go. And now, the retirement age 65, probably we're looking down the barrel of 70. But even still, life expectancy is 88, 89, and probably going to rise to something in the 90s. So do you still want to be working, at that age? How do you want to be living? How do you want to set your life up? All of those questions are coming into people's minds. We also get the statistics that people who change jobs every 2 years get paid more. And we think, oh, maybe I should change jobs. Maybe that's the answer. So I think a lot of these, times are changing. The way the world works is, changing. And I think it's only natural that a lot of people are kind of reevaluating their options.
And this kind of lifestyle change is really being facilitated by technology, isn't it?
Yeah. So, if you went back pre-1950s, if you said to somebody, I'm going to go and start a business, what you probably meant by I'm going to start a business is I've got lots of money. I'm going to get a piece of land, build a factory, buy or lease a large amount of equipment. I'm going to, buy lots of raw materials. I'm going to hire 20, 30, 40 laborers and factory workers, 15 people in administration. I mean, setting up a business, was a serious thing not that long ago, because the means of production, the ability to produce something, was very, very difficult. So, even just the simple stuff of the ability to produce a brochure or the ability to produce product packaging, the ability to find a retailer who's willing to sell something that you've got. There weren't any such things as digital products. So essentially you had a few, cottage industries, small retailing shops, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, local service providers, accountants, solicitors, those kind of people. But that was kind of a different story to setting up a business. Today, you can take an idea to market in days or weeks. You can create digital products that are downloadable all over the world. You can use Amazon to have distribution of physical products all over the world. Someone sitting in their bedroom essentially can be running a global business. They could pick an incredibly narrow little niche, and something as stupid as dog tutus or something like that, and you could potentially be selling thousands of these things to people all over the world if you seem to capture people's attention, maybe on Instagram or YouTube, and then you sell them on Amazon. And all these kind of things are very, very possible. I'm kind of using a silly example, but I'll give you some real examples. One of our clients is doing a multi-million-pound business selling high-end African fashion, 450,000 followers on Instagram, millions of pounds worth of business going through the online e-commerce store. She's got a very small office up in Norwich. These are the types of things that are incredibly common these days.
And you can use cloud technology to scale a business like you never could before.
Yeah, you break everything that you need into smaller pieces. So if you need a little bit of computing power, you pay for a little bit. If you need a lot, you can pay for a lot. A lot of the services are free or almost for free. Billions of dollars worth of investment has gone into software solutions that you can, use very, very cheaply. So someone's gone out and built, world-class CRM systems that have probably cost, hundreds of millions of pounds to develop, something like Salesforce or Infusionsoft. You can use that technology for a couple of £100 a month. So all of that sort of stuff is incredibly powerful. At the same time, technology is displacing a lot of people. So we've seen the beginning of technology displacing people, but we're only at the very, very beginning of technology unemployment, a great wave of technology unemployment. In a lot of small businesses that I talk to, they weigh up the costs of, do I hire someone or do I spend an extra £35,000 a year on Facebook marketing? So sometimes people don't realize it, but their job is being weighed up against ad spend. And a lot of small businesses think to themselves, actually, you know what, I'm just going to spend more money on ads rather than hiring someone. That happens every day. Where we're going with AI and different technologies that are being created is definitely the ability to automate more and more of a business.
You talk in the book about the global small business. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that and what are the components?
Yeah, so a global small business, 3 words that kind of don't really go together historically. The fact that you'd be global and small. And that's kind of the promise of today's entrepreneur. That's what we have to build. So, realistically, my business is a fairly small business. We have about 50 employees globally, so that makes us a small business. Big by some standards if you're a very small business, but certainly not a big business. We do business in Australia, Singapore, UK, and the USA. We also have clients in places like India and Jordan and Ireland. So we do business in all sorts of places around the world, and we do that with a very small team. And we actually have a diversified range of products and services, as diverse as we have a publishing arm of the business, we have a technology services part of the business, and a film production part of the business, as well as the training and accelerator part of the business. So quite a diverse business serving people all over the world with about 50 employees. So it's kind of, that's even a big example. We have a lot of our clients who have got 4 or 8 people, and they're shipping products all over the world. They've got a brand that's relevant for 100,000 customers. This is this kind of idea that if you embrace the technology platforms, if you embrace social media marketing, if you embrace e-commerce, you're instantly a small global business.
And that's really focusing on what you call micro niches.
Yeah, a micro niche is a great place to start. So a micro niche is where, when you're starting a business, it's about finding traction within a very, very small, little narrow part of a marketplace. So you might say, I'm going to start by building a really strong relationship with vegetarian marathon runners or single mums who are entrepreneurs. You find a narrow little part of the market, combining a few different niches, get it right narrowed down to a micro niche. But because of social media and technology, you can actually go out and find the 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 people who find that niche, enthralling. And you can build a tribe of them. You can build a community of these people. And away you go. You've got an incredible business. So one of our clients runs a WhatsApp group, and it's a WhatsApp group for interim managers. And these are people who are fairly senior in different organizations, and they take on interim management roles on different day rates. And he runs a WhatsApp group called Executive Gigs, and something like 1 to 2 million pounds worth of fees has been generated out the back of it in the first 12 months, just by having a coordinated group, a WhatsApp group full of the right people, very narrow kind of niche of people, but they're all collaborating and connecting inside a WhatsApp group, and they're from all over Europe, and away you go.
What are some of the challenges facing entrepreneurs?
Oh, the challenges are non-stop and never-ending. And one of the things that frustrates me is that people kind of, people know that I've written books about entrepreneurship, and they think that I'm kind of selling the dream, which to a degree, there's a wonderful opportunity here, but it's not without its challenges, and it's not without its hassles and its, its risks. So there's a number of, harsh truths that you have to embrace if you're going to be an entrepreneur. No one's going to come and save you. There's no person waiting on the other end of a phone who can help you with IT issues, or who you can go and talk to about, can we access additional budget, or what do you think? Should I approve this or not approve this? So no one's there to save you or to do that. You need a lot of micro wins before you start getting a mini win, and you need lots of mini wins before you get some little wins, and then you need a lot of little wins before you get a big win. So you've got to be okay with going through that process. As an entrepreneur, you're not leveraging existing assets. You're not leveraging a big brand, and you're not leveraging a workforce, and you're not leveraging an existing culture or systems or budgets. So all of those things you have to create yourself. So you're in the mode of asset creation. And then one of the other big challenges with entrepreneurship is that a lot of people get into entrepreneurship because they absolutely love the work. They love the idea of doing a particular thing. So maybe they love fitness, and they love the idea of being a fitness instructor and helping people with their fitness, or they love design, so they love the idea of helping people, create brands and designs. But most of them overlook the fact that there's a very arduous sales process attached to the front end. So there is no such thing as clients who just go and sign themselves up for high-end products. And there's no such thing as clients who buy low-end consumer products without marketing and branding spend. So essentially, at some point, you're going to have to put on the hat called salesperson and run around making lots of sales calls. And typically, a salesperson turns 50 leads into 1 or 2 sales. So you might have to figure out 50 different names of people that you're going to call today, and set up 10 meetings, and those 10 meetings might turn into 1 or 2 sales. And that'll never end. So the sales process will not actually stop. 3 years from now, you'll still be doing that. So it's, that's one of the challenges that people think, okay, I'll put a video on YouTube and that will just drive business day in, day out. And, it very rarely works like that.
And how has our thinking about work changed?
Yeah, well, the old way of thinking about work is that, you get a job for life and you work within a big brand and they look after you and they pay you a stable wage and a pension. And then when you hit 60, you retire. The new way is that you're probably never going to retire, and that you better be doing something that you enjoy and that you love, because this idea that you're going to somehow be looked after by someone is probably not the case. It's less and less the case. The idea that you're going to have a retirement is less and less the case. So you've got to look after your own retirement, and even better than looking after your own retirement is doing something that you don't want to retire from, that you just enjoy doing every week, and you're having lots of fun doing, and that it's a challenging adventure, but it's still fun. So that's definitely a new way. These are some of the key ideas I explore in the book, that, we go to school and we're trained to be the smartest kid in the class. And actually, the best entrepreneurs are people who recognize their shortcomings and they go and find people who are very smart and they get them to come and work with them. The schooling system teaches us not to copy, and yet in entrepreneurship, you have to go and look at your competition and find out what they're doing and see if you can do a better job of it. But you certainly go around looking at what other people are doing. The schooling system says you got to do everything on your own. That you can't collaborate in teams in order to achieve an exam result, whereas the world of entrepreneurship is all about collaboration. Many of the key ideas that make you a successful entrepreneur are actually very counterintuitive for the training that we got for 12 years, courtesy of the government that basically created a training program for the entrepreneurial, or for the industrial age. And it's the wrong training program, almost the opposite training program that's right for the entrepreneurial age.
Yeah, and many corporate training courses still.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, big corporates are organizations that have assets and need to protect those assets primarily and then monetize them secondarily. The world of entrepreneurship is starting with no assets. You have to invent assets and you have to embrace opportunity and take risks.
So in the book, you talk about the entrepreneurial brain and the 3 components of that. Could you take us through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the fun parts of the book that I love seeing play out in real life, which is that every human comes pre-installed with 3 kind of brains, 3 programs that you can run. So we call this the reptile, the monkey, and the visionary entrepreneur, or the empire builder. And essentially the reptile brain is the part of the brain that is fight, flight, or freeze. It's very much that primitive brain. It's designed to keep you safe in genuine survival situations. So if you encounter a rhinoceros, you're either going to try and run, you're going to try and freeze and hope it doesn't notice you, or you're going to try and attack it and fight it. So in the modern world, this is a very, very ridiculous strategy for almost anything you would encounter, and yet it's pre-installed. So we all have reptile moments. We have moments where we say the absolutely wrong thing and send the wrong email and capitalize our tweets when we should probably be acting a little more presidential. So these kind of reptile moments can get the better of us. The monkey mode is the monkey brain of just repeating the past. Just do what you're trained to do. Don't rock the boat, and just basically get on with whatever it is that your training says. So repeat the past. Ford engineer yesterday. So wake up in the same place, go to the same job, travel the same way, get home at the same time, eat the same meals, watch the same shows on Netflix and repeat that as often as possible. And if it kept you alive last week, it'd probably keep you alive next week too. So that's kind of the monkey brain, and that's the default. That's actually the part of the brain that is most powerful, and it's the habit-forming part of the brain. And really, that's kind of the enemy as well, because it doesn't create transformational growth. And the part of the brain that does create transformation growth is the part of the brain associated with creativity, empathy, love, compassion, innovation. And this is this kind of frontal cortex. And this is where we call this the visionary entrepreneur. And this is the part of the brain that doesn't forward engineer the past, that reverse engineers the future. So often you kind of wake up the visionary when you go on holiday. You're sitting by the pool at the resort, having a nice cocktail, reading a book, and kind of your mind drifts off and you think to yourself, why don't I start a business? Or why don't I build that team? Or why don't I hire that person? Or, get that software or record that video? And you kind of start reverse engineering the future rather than forward engineering the past. You think, what if? And why don't I? And actually, that's the part of the brain that has to come alive if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship requires a lot of compassion, empathy, creativity, innovation, love, strategy. Like all of this stuff happens in the frontal cortex. So you've got to get really good at using the frontal cortex, and you've got to get really good at recognizing when you're being monkey or reptile.
There's a great quote in the book, create the future, don't consume the past.
Yeah, so that desire to consume is also built in. And what's interesting is that most of us experience joy in the act of creation. And we hallucinate that we would actually love to consume more. We think, wouldn't it be great to go on more holidays? Wouldn't it be great to own more cars or have fancier jewelry or, have more clothing or bigger house and all that sort of stuff? And we kind of get caught up in this idea that wouldn't it be great to consume more? And you actually realize really quickly that it brings you a bit of joy for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But very, very rapidly, it just becomes another thing to look after, another thing that requires energy from you. So big houses require lots of cleaning and maintenance, and fancy cars require lots of servicing and worrying about whether they're safe or not. And actually, the real joy, the real enjoyment of life is in creating something that doesn't exist. And it's that creative process. It's the enjoyment that we get the most out of, and it's something I try and teach my kids this. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. My 4-year-old will often be building a race car track with this little track set that he's got, and he'll build it and build it and build it, and he'll be having such an amazing time building it. And then his little brother will come in and sit on it and pull it apart, and of course he has a complete meltdown. And I pull him aside and I say, listen, the fun part's building it, right? It doesn't matter if somebody wrecked it because remember how much fun you had when you were building it. And I say, now we've got another opportunity to build it again. It's the same with entrepreneurship. It's actually the joy is in the building it.
So failure is an important part of that as well.
Yeah, failure is daily when you're an entrepreneur. Like you literally, everything you do doesn't work. If you have 10 sales meetings, 8 of them don't go ahead and buy anything. So you fail 8 times and you make 2 sales. Now those 2 sales might be worth £20,000, and that's a great day. But ultimately you failed 8 out of 10 times. In fact, if 10 out of 10 people purchased whatever it is that you were selling, I would immediately say you need to put your prices up. You're too cheap. Something's wrong because you're not failing enough. If you run marketing campaigns, you might have. Recently we boosted a video on Facebook, and we got 1.1 million views. We spent £5,000 boosting a video, got 1.1 million views. And when we looked at the analytics, the number of people that watched all the way to the end out of 1.1 million was, I think, 21,000 or 28,000, something like a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of the people who watched the beginning. So 1.1 million started watching the video, and they call it 25,000 ended up watching the video. So what a colossal failure that is. We spent £5,500 where, 99% of people did not even want to watch all the end to the 2 minutes of video. And yet that campaign was an incredibly successful campaign. The number of people that generated as leads and appointments and, people engaging with us was through the roof. It was very financially successful. It was a massive success on the financial terms, but if you look at it a different way, it was a massive failure. A million people couldn't even be bothered watching past a minute.
That's pretty typical these days, given people's attention spans.
Exactly, and this is the thing that it doesn't even cross my mind that failure is a bad thing. Like, failure is literally just the daily experience of entrepreneurship. You have to be constant. In fact, the more successful you become, the bigger the failures.
What sort of things can we do to develop our entrepreneurial brain?
So in the book, I give 10 challenges, and these are all things that I did in my very early 20s. I was so fortunate. I was employee number 4 at a startup with a very successful entrepreneur, and he was very much my mentor. Because I got in so early, I spent a lot of time very close to him, and he would set me all these entrepreneurial challenges to train me as an entrepreneur. Things like I had to walk around with $2,000 in my pocket at all times, and he wanted me to change my relationship with money. He wanted me to think of $2,000 as pocket change, and I was terrified of doing this, as you can imagine. And, I kind of, it was a big lump of wad of cash, and I had taken it off my credit cards and, tapped into some, savings. I think I might have sold a surfboard or something like that in order to get it. And to walk around with $2,000 in my pocket, at 19 was pretty terrifying. I was driving a $2,000 car at the time. So, I had more money in my pocket than my car was worth. And what he wanted from me is he didn't, I was selling product that, a typical sale was about $5,000. He didn't want me thinking that $5,000 was a huge amount of money, because I'm sitting there talking to people, asking them to buy something for $5,000. And then in my brain, I think, well, $5,000 is all the money in the world. So my energy towards that is resistant. And it was actually quite an interesting challenge, because, as soon as I start carrying this money, I start thinking, oh yeah, within about 3 or 4 months, I actually started to have this thought that $2,000 isn't a lot of money. It's not that much. And it kind of radically shifted, my perspective pretty quickly. Some of the other challenges, he got me to journal every day, writing down my ideas. He would often get me to go through a magazine and rewrite the ads and basically say, look, I want you to go through this magazine, and every single ad in this magazine, I want you to rewrite the ad so it's more customer centric, so that the ad really communicates the value proposition and in the language of the customer. So I would, go through and transcribe these ads on weekends and try and create better ad campaign in magazines. Some of the other things was I had to take 2 people out to lunch each week and pay for their bill. I very rapidly built quite a network, and I also built a lot of knowledge just by picking people's brains over lunch because I was picking up the bill. So I figured I better learn something. So all of these weird, wonderful things that I had to do kind of woke up my entrepreneurial brain in a big way. When I was 21, I left John and set up my own company, and it did $1 million in its first year. It went to $10 million in year 3 or 4, and it was one of those very fast growth companies that was doing over $1 million a month in sales before I was 25. It was. I often put it down to that kind of entrepreneurial training in the early days that kind of set me up for that kind of odd, unexpected entrepreneurial journey.
Let's move on, if we can, to product strategy. I wonder if you could tell us what kind of product strategies successful entrepreneurs are using.
Well, in a lot of businesses that I see, they get the product strategy wrong. And the product strategy is one of the most important things that will dictate how much money the business can earn. So a couple of wrong strategies is only one product or service, which we call an oops business. And only one product or service is, if I said to you, what do you sell? And you say, oh, we sell plumbing. And I say, well, what else do you sell? And I say, no, it's just plumbing services. And basically you've created a binary choice. I either have a plumbing service issue that's now, or I've got nothing to buy. Whereas, you could potentially add different products to that. You could say, well, we do plumbing services, but we also have a range of taps and baths. We also have some materials online, some downloads. We have a renovation guide that we can send you. And there's an enormous amount of things that a plumber could actually come up with that would give them more product and service to have available. So one mistake is to only have one product or service. Another mistake is to have too many things, to be a one-stop shop, which is the opposite So this is where you essentially don't become very good at anything because you're trying to do too many things. Um, the other one that's kind of a good place to start, but not a good place to end up, is a brokerage model business where you're selling other people's things. But the best product strategy is where you have 4 products. So the 4 products that every business should have is a gift that they can give away for free. So a free product could be a digital product, a download, something that's of value but free. A product for prospects, which is something that's entry level, low cost, but really good at building trust and giving people a first experience. A core product, which is the main thing that you sell, and a product for clients, which is something that you can sell to people who've already bought the core product.
If you're thinking about setting up your own business, how would you recommend going about it? Is it better to jump in or do it in stages? What sort of advice could you give?
Well, if you're working in a really large company, I think it's actually quite shocking to go out on your own. And I don't necessarily think that's a really good idea for a lot of people if you've mostly worked in a large company. A mid-step is to go and work in a smaller business. So, there are, a lot of people kind of have this mindset that you either work in a big corporate or you go start your own business. And actually, for me, doing 2 years working in someone else's small business was enormously valuable. There are already millions of businesses out there that have less than 10 employees. And actually, if you go and join a company and you're employee number 6 or employee number 7, you're going to get paid every month. It might not be as much as your corporate salary, but it'll probably be more than you'd earn setting up your own business. It's going to give you an experience of what small businesses are really like behind the scenes. You're going to learn some incredibly valuable lessons and work very closely with a founder. So going off and actually doing a year or maybe 2 years working in somebody else's entrepreneurial business is a great idea. I really encourage that. The other one that's very popular at the moment is what's called the side hustle. The side hustle is just something that you can do on weekends or something you can do in evenings. I know someone who's got a corporate job, but they've actually set up a micro distillery, doing a few boutique gins. And that business is doing maybe 20 or 30,000 pounds a year. It might make 5 or 6 grand profit for the year, but it's a micro business and it's a side hustle. And eventually, over the course of a couple of years, it starts to get a bit of momentum, and it kind of gives you a few signals that maybe you could do this as the full-time gig.
So we're coming up to the end of the podcast, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who work for big companies thinking, well, I've listened to this and there's not a lot for me. What is there about entrepreneurship that they can learn, that they can bring to their company?
I think all companies need to become a little entrepreneurial, a little more entrepreneurial. In most boards around the world, the board and the executive team are saying things like, we need to be a bit more entrepreneurial. We need to look for new opportunities. We need to maybe kind of start businesses within the business, or we need to take some bets so that we disrupt ourselves rather than being disrupted. So within all companies, I think the entrepreneurial mindset of looking for opportunity, being able to spot where the industry is going, being able to build loyal customers and, kind of take that approach, that's actually a hugely valuable skill. Some of the entrepreneurial skills that are the cornerstone skills of entrepreneurship are very valuable within corporate. So the skill of pitching ideas, which is a cornerstone entrepreneurial skill, is becoming more and more valuable. So getting good at pitching, going to entrepreneur pitching competitions and learning how entrepreneurs are pitching will actually help anyone in their career. A cornerstone skill of entrepreneurship is publishing content. So getting a little bit better at, putting your ideas into writing and creating collateral and documents out of ideas is a cornerstone skill. Looking for new product opportunities is another, great skill that people can bring into their daily lives within a bigger business. Raising their own profile or getting through the noise, or raising the profile of the organization, going and forging a joint venture or a channel partnership or a strategic partnership would be another great entrepreneurial skill to bring to a large organization that would kind of accelerate your journey through the corporate career path. So these are some of the great entrepreneurial skills that you can use even within a larger organization. And I've done a lot of work with big companies. So we've done work with KPMG, we've done done projects with large automotive companies. Those companies are really trying to embrace entrepreneurial thinking.
Daniel, that's been really interesting. Thanks very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope I've shared a few little tidbits that have been valuable.
I was talking to Daniel Priestley, the author of Entrepreneur Revolution, How to Develop Your Entrepreneurial Mindset, which is published by Wiley. If you use the link to the CIM bookshop and the promotional code in the show notes, you'll be entitled to a further 15% discount, and that includes free shipping on all UK orders. That's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, goodbye.